I came here in the class of 44B in the fall of 43. I was 18 and a half, 19 years old at that time. I learned on these BT-13s. I came up here from Lafayette, Louisiana, which is where I flew the primary trainers. But here, the BT-13 was a much more important airplane. It had flaps. It had a bigger engine. It had an enclosed cockpit. And so my problem, and I came here to tell you that problem, I couldn't fly it. I couldn't fly it. My instructor did everything he could to get me. The very beginning in flying, you've got to learn how to fly straight and level, visually, by looking outside. I could not handle that airplane straight and level. I would let a wing drop down, or my nose would drop down, or I'd gain altitude. It didn't matter. I was not a satisfactory student, and I couldn't blame my instructor at all for putting me up for a check ride. Now, amongst us cadets, a check ride meant only one thing: a washout ride. And so I went up with this first lieutenant. That's another thing. I'd never been with a first lieutenant before.
They were mostly second lieutenant.
All second lieutenant instructors. Well, I went up with this first lieutenant. He was a mean son of a gun. He was mean. I'd heard about him before. He had washed out everybody that ever went up with him. And a washout ride to us cadets meant that before you left the airport, you already had your written orders to go into the infantry. That was the end of it. And all I wanted to do was fly airplanes. So we took off. I did a good job and got up to about 3,000 feet. And he told me to cage my gyros, a directional gyro and an artificial horizon, so that I could not use the directional gyro and artificial horizon. Well, I am a big guy, and I put my shoulders over to where he couldn't see. I would reach up to cage those gyros, but I didn't cage them. I left them operating. From the back cockpit, he could not see my gyros. And I kept my head moving left and right, but my eyeballs were right on the instrument panel all the time. I knew I could fly instrument flight. I couldn't fly visually. That was my problem. And I'd been in the link trainer. You're familiar with the link trainer, a synthetic trainer, and I made good grades. I was perfect in flying the link trainer. And I figured if I was permitted to use these two gyros, I wouldn't have any trouble. And so I held the plane straight and level. I held the altitude just right and the direction just right. And then he had me to do a lazy 8. No problem. I did it on the instruments. And he had me to do a chandelle, come up around over and go in the other direction. I did the chandelle. I did all the maneuvers that a student is supposed to do, and I did them perfectly. I had time turns, and I was just perfect. And the check pilot in the back, over the interphone, I couldn't talk back to him, but I could listen to him, and he would give me instructions as to what to do next. And he kept getting quieter and quieter, and the guy finally quit talking. And I wondered what's going on back there. And then suddenly he opened his rear canopy and the wind blew in. Well, I kept flying the plane straight and level as best I could. And then I noticed he had climbed out on the left wing. And he had their handholds on that side of the fuselage. and he pulled himself up alongside of the cockpit where I was, and he reached up to open the canopy. It had a lock on the top, and I held the canopy shut because in his right hand he had the stick from the rear cockpit, and the man did not even have his parachute on. And there he was outside in the wind, and I was in charge. I was in charge. And by golly, he couldn't get the canopy open. He kept swinging the stick to try to point out he was going to hit me in the head with that stick. Now, this guy had to be nuts. I started wiggling the wings at that time, and I pointed to the back for him to go back and sit down. And that lieutenant went back. It must have thrown a lot of fear in him. I tell you, as far as I was concerned, I would have flipped the thing upside down. I'd have thrown him off the airplane because I was going to be an Army pilot. No two ways about it. And so he went back. He got in the cockpit, and when he was in, I swung around and headed back for Walnut Ridge, and I landed as quickly as I could, taxied in and parked. And before the propeller quit turning, I was on the wing and outside on the ground myself. Finally, he got out of the airplane and came back and followed me into base operations. Well, in coming back, he only said one thing to me. He gave me hell for not parking the wheels on the painted spots on the ramp. Well, that's what I did wrong. And then he went in and he got my instructor, and he chewed that guy out and gave him holy heck for sending me up for a check ride because I had perfectly flown the airplane.
And he risked his life to try to...
He risked his life, and I tell you, I wasn't going to turn him in for being crazy because I was just a simple cadet. And so I would have killed him. I tell you, I would have killed him. So nothing more was ever said about that, and I never turned him in for being crazy because I know he was crazy. And so I was transferred to Walnut Ridge, to Blytheville, to twin engine training. I got my wings and commission there. I stayed in the Army for 12 years without getting out when the war ended.
Still in the Army Air Forces.
And I stayed in the Army Air Forces, and I got out after 12 years extended active duty and became a weekend warrior. And at the age of 60, I retired from the Air Force as a lieutenant colonel, and I'm still drawing that money. And by golly, they shouldn't cut off my pension because I've done this, but I cheated, and I became a pilot in the Air Force. Enough said.
So you had active duty of 12 years.
Yes, sir.
And then you're like a reserve officer.
Yes, I call it a weekend warrior.
So you were a reserve in the Reserve Air Force now.
Yes.
And maintained your active duty status as a reserve officer
and
on the weekend, and retired at 60 then.
When I retired at the age of 60, I retired with 41 years of military service.
It all gets back to Walnut Ridge.
All gets back to that check ride year. I was not going into the infantry, I tell you. No way. I would have killed the guy. I would have flipped him off the airplane.
What do you remember about Walnut Ridge as a place, though? You were here like 8 weeks or something.
Yes. The barracks were not painted.
They were tar paper.
They were tar paper.
They were temporary.
And the floors were not even varnished. They were pine tongue and groove floors, and they were extremely hard to keep clean. We cadets were supposed to keep our floors clean, and we had a red-headed second lieutenant. He was our adjutant. I've never liked redheads ever since. I'm sorry. But we were going into town here, and I was all set up to go down and get me a good steak that night. And just about 15 minutes before the bus came to pick us up, this red-headed lieutenant put a notice on a bulletin board that everyone must scrub their floors clean before they could go on leave. Well, I knew in 15 minutes I couldn't change the color of my floor. It was just as dark, dirty gray as could be. And so I stayed there, and I got this GI soap. Have you ever seen GI soap? It's the ugliest stuff that they don't sell now, Octagon soap. And I got scrub brushes, and I brushed my side of the room. They had 2 cadets to the room. My roommate, I didn't touch his side. I touched my side only. And those pine floors, I scrubbed all the dirt off, and it turned solid white, beautiful floor. And so I missed my ride. I didn't get my steak that night. And so the next week, there was a notice on the bulletin board that redhead had put there that everyone was to scrub their floors as white as Julian Roadman had done. And I was held up by the red-headed adjutant as the best way to scrub a floor. And guess what they did to get back at me?
They screwed up your floor.
Well, I had my bunk all made up real nice, the way the Army way to do it. But I came in to go to bed one night, and I pulled my sheets back and my blanket, and I climbed in, and they had taken the ashes from the stove, and they had put them inside between the sheets. And so there I was, all blackened by what they had put in my bunk. They got even with me, and I learned a lesson there. You don't show up the next guy. No way, not in the military. So I learned a lesson myself there.
Did you feel safe in the BT-13?
Yes, I did. It was a good airplane.
But there were a lot of people being killed out here in crashes.
We didn't know that. They didn't put out that information. Now, I did know of one incident where a cadet brought a plane back. He was solo. He came back, and he had yelled emergency SOS. I don't remember what it was, over the radio. And he landed on the edge of the field. He just barely made it to this field, but he landed on grass on the edge. And the tower operator gave him heck for not landing on the runway. Well, they investigated to find out why he landed on the grass out there. It so happened that the crankshaft of the engine had broken, and the propeller was just windmilling by itself. There was no thrust from the engine. And so he glided in, and he was lucky to get in. Yeah.
Did you ever land, do you remember landing at Walcott or Beech Grove or Bono or these Pocahontas?
Yes.
Tell me about landing. Why would you go to those auxiliary fields?
We could practice landing. The air traffic was terrible right here at the aerodrome. See, we were trying to operate over 200 airplanes at one time. And sometimes to come back in and land, you would have to travel 25 miles away from here and get in a line and follow that line in to land on the runway. So big traffic jam in the air, and that's why they had those auxiliary fields. Now the auxiliary fields were hazardous in one way. They did not have emergency crews out there in case we had an accident in trying to land or take off. No fire truck, no ambulance, nothing for emergency purposes. All your emergencies were handled right here on the airplane.